We're nearing the end of our day, but we still have some more excitement coming up next. So let's keep the party going, keep this energy up. Thank you all so much for being here. I've really enjoyed my time with you all, and we have a few more conversations that are going to be happening, so I'll be here for a while. All right, next up. It's all well and good to be the disruptor, the new kid in town, supposedly changing the game. But it takes another level of skill to adapt your existing brand to the new paradigm and turn on a dime by nurturing a robust base of support. Our next speaker has done it many times over, each time more successfully than the last. Here to speak about reinvention and the process of building a resilient brand is Bobby Hundreds. I love that name. Bobby Hundreds, the co-founder and CCO of the Hundreds Family Style Food Festival and Atom Bomb Squad. And he's speaking with Dennis Todisco, head of streetwear and innovation partnerships at Instagram. And here they are.
Thank you.
Now.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, everybody. How you doing? You guys awake and alert? It's a lot. I feel like we're in school a little bit. So we came here to bring the
energy.
Bring the spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're here for the energy.
Yeah,
we're the fun part.
Yeah, we were just saying backstage, everyone has to buy an atom bomb, right?
Oh yeah, we're here to force everyone to buy my NFTs. No, we're not.
No, just kidding. But Bobby, how you doing?
Yeah.
Welcome to New York.
Good. Yeah, it's we were commenting, walking around all day. Ben and I, my partner and our team, we were visiting all the galleries in town, and we were just commenting on how nice the weather is. And it's really bizarre to say that New York has gotten up on LA this year.
Seriously.
Which is strange for us, but I'm like, dude, the weather's amazing out in New York. So
it's been incredible. It's been incredible. So the topic of this discussion is managing disruption in reinvention.
Yep.
Obviously, something the Hundreds is no stranger to, especially yourself. I mean, we talk about the origins of the Hundreds back in the day.
Yep.
Congratulations, by the way, 20 years the Hundreds has been around for, 2003. I mean, that's incredible in of itself, thinking about the...
Dennis has been there since the beginning, too, though.
That's true.
So don't sell yourself short. We've both known each other for a very long time.
I started as a fan of the Hundreds. I was checking the blog every day. I was trying to get a Paisley hoodie, and I think striking out, I probably ended up buying one off eBay.
Yep.
But yeah, it's been incredible to see your journey. Take us back to those early days of 2003. Maybe even let's go a little bit before that. Maybe pre-Hundreds.
Yeah.
What was Bobby Kim doing?
Oh my God. Is it still on? Can you guys hear me? Okay. Did that?
Test.
You guys
Yeah. All right. Cool.
I grew up in Southern California. I'm a son of Korean immigrants, so Korean American. Never quite felt like I necessarily belonged or had a home anywhere. And in fact, the older I get, I feel like I'm even more in terms of like culture homeless, like spiritually homeless, politically homeless. And so I've just always felt like a little bit on the outside. I found community in skateboarding and growing up in the hardcore scene, the punk scene in Southern California. Was always an artist and decided to design and develop my own brand with my friend Ben because, again, we didn't really have a world where we felt like we belonged. And so that's what the Hundreds was. Yeah.
And going back to set the scene for streetwear back in the day, like 2003, what was
it like back then?
What was popping then? I mean, obviously, Japan played a big influence on you personally.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah, Japan was probably paramount in terms of culture at the time. Still very much is in terms of design and in terms of care and meticulous detail work. But I think Japan and New York were really where our sights were set. But we were an LA brand, and the narrative really was at the time that LA was known more for reality and unscripted television. Paris Hilton, Von Dutch, Ed Hardy, Christian Audigier was really controlling the market at the time, as you all remember. We were a few years before the denim boom, but streetwear out of LA was not really a thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're really like an institution on Fairfax.
Yes.
I mean, when you consider when the 100 started,
Yeah.
what was on the block at that time?
Nothing. There was nothing on Fairfax. There was nothing coming out of LA. It was really, people had written us off, I think, and especially, I remember we would travel, like Ben and I would travel around the world and everyone would be like, oh, you LA guys, like, we would dress a certain way. We didn't necessarily fit in. We didn't have the proper cosigns, especially from some of the larger players. Like, we weren't like the coolest kids in the room at all, but we just wanted to play. And Fairfax was a street that, we had set up our first clubhouse on, which eventually became our office and our studio. And Supreme LA had opened up at the time, which for those who remember a world before Supreme LA, Supreme being a local skate shop here and doing what it had done, set up a few shops in Japan and making waves out in Europe, for them to set up and establish in LA and really put that city on the map in terms of, we consider Los Angeles a new hub for where streetwear can call home. And we were right there. We had an office at the time, just right on the corner from Supreme. And then I was broadcasting using my blog, which was probably the first foray of us in terms of that intersection of tech and fashion, merging for the first time. And so every day on the100s.com, I was broadcasting and blogging and journaling. This was around 2003, 2004, what we were up to. And so it sounds very commonplace today, sounds very hackneyed and trite, but at the time, for there to be transparency and exposure between the purveyors and the consumers, for there to be no walls, was kind of like a relatively novel concept. This idea that there is no distinction. And that's something that I had borrowed and been inspired from growing up in the punk scene. If we were at a show back in the day, and it's still like this if you go to a hardcore show specifically, it's really hard to tell who the singer is and who the fan is, because the mic is being passed around and everyone is getting to chime in and having a voice, right? And so when we were setting up the brand, it was the same ideology. Why am I up on stage? There should be no hierarchy. We're all on a level playing field. We should all be able to pass the mic around. So if I'm learning how to build a brand and starting off on my entrepreneurial journey, everyone else should be coming with me, and they're all a part of this story. So if we're trying to source rivets for denim downtown or on the streets of Hong Kong going out into the open markets, we want our customer to come alongside with us so that they can also learn how to build their own brands and also have an appreciation for what it means to brand build, right? And so that was the entire premise, and that's what the blog was centralized around. And we weren't thinking of it as anything disruptive or innovative at the time. All we were doing was, how can we best get our community involved in the makings of this company? As we're having success and finding success, how can we also share that knowledge and that wealth with the consumers who support us every day? Now here's this burgeoning new technology called blogging, about 3 to 4 years before social media had taken grasp. And through the power of the blog, everyone could metaphorically and figuratively, literally, be on the same page. Right? Every day they're keeping up with us. The food that we're eating, now everyone's eating at the same spots. When we're hanging out with significant people in culture, like Dennis Tedisco, or we're out in New York, so we're like Futura, Kaz, like Stash, like all like the big homies from back in the day. And we're photographing them and saying, this is the artist to watch. These are the shoes you need to wear. This is a store that we just discovered, and it's a whole new world that you should tap into. That was the only thing that was on our minds. How can we share and include the community along in the process? Blogging just happened to be the tool to help us get there. And then social media comes along, and we had a big voice on social media, and I got hired to speak at a lot of conferences like this, like, wow, you guys crush it on the internet. You're so good at Instagram. How do you do it? And I'm like, it has nothing to do with the tech. The tech is just a tool. It's always the artisan. It's almost like sitting there and praising the hammer or the screwdriver and saying like, oh my God, tell us about this screwdriver. And I'm like, have you seen the person who uses it? Like, they're brilliant. They're captivating. They're innovative. And I just have to say this because we're sitting at a fashion tech conference, and I'm sure everyone's thinking of either Web3 or crypto or AI at this point in time. And you're looking at it all as the solution and the answer of like, oh, maybe this can be what makes us a lot of money, or maybe this can be what facilitates the process or smooths over a lot of friction in the fashion process. And it can, but you cannot negate the person who is actually using the tool, which is you and the creator. And as much as I love and champion AI, and like we're on top of this every day and trying to figure it out, I still have the utmost belief in the artists behind them, because artists continue to be unpredictable. And so there is no pattern to recognize when it comes to an unpredictable person, especially someone who's innovative, especially someone who's always 2 steps ahead of the game, which all the artists and creators who are up on stage today are. Right? And so I think we put a lot of emphasis on tech as like, this is the solution, this is the next wave, this is what we have to focus on, and not enough on the people who are using the tech, which is what it's always come down to, right? Technology and fashion, the intersection, the marriage first came about through tailoring in the Middle Ages, right? The concept of tailoring, having Under Armour, they were using it to essentially like protective layers of cloth. And they realized that, oh, if we form fit it, then the soldiers were better in combat, right? And then they realized, oh, it's actually a way to delineate genders. And then that then progressed into identity, right? Self-expression. And that was the very beginning of what fashion was. But really, you can't talk about the origins of fashion without talking about the origins of self-expression and identity. They're the same. And so it's the same thing today. It's like, oh, we're just only going to talk about tailoring as like that's all that fashion ever was. Of course not. It was what people were trying to express of themselves, right? They were using it for utility and for insulation from the elements and insulation from exposure, but it was really just about self-expression and me being an artist and having an individual voice and place in the world. And it's never changed. It's been centuries and centuries, and there's been so much new technology that's transpired. But it's been the same, it's really the same mentality over and over, and everyone's just always like, oh, now this is the new thing. No, it's always been the same thing. It's artists and designers.
So speaking about cultivating community, I mean, in 2019, you published a great blog article. We're plugging the blog again. It was Streetwear is Dead. Mm-hmm. Right? And
I did.
You were...
I predated Virgil's by like 4 months.
Exactly.
I called it dead first. Yeah.
You get it. You know, streetwear has gone through so many different waves over the years, obviously. I mean, when we talk about 2003, it was obviously like the Stussies, the Massimos of the world. I mean, and then, of course, the Hundreds being a new brand. Then, of course, you know, the Supremes, the Crooks and Castles on Fairfax, and then the evolution of people wearing like more tailored clothing, like during the whole menswear blogger era,
the trad
and
stuff.
Exactly. And then what do we go into? Maybe more like leather with like Watch the Throne.
Yeah,
and
like
Riccardo
street
Tisci,
goth.
Street goth. Exactly. And now obviously things have since evolved. How do you manage continuing to grow a community in like an environment now that feels like trends are evolving at like lightning speed.
At a lightning speed.
And like people are almost wearing like avatars every day versus like being
Totally.
a part of a trend, because it felt like more of a commitment back then, right? Like if you were the surf guy or the skate guy or like you kind of had a uniform, and now things are kind of evolving more. How do you manage that as a brand?
Yeah, the very first time that I got asked to speak anywhere was at UCLA. It was like 3 years into the brand. I was very young at the time, which is sad to say. And the first, or I would say one of the last questions of the night, was this kid, and he stood up and he said, how do you expect to stay relevant and have your pulse on culture in 20 years? And we're 20 years in now. And so my answer is the same as it was back then. And the answer was that as long as we stay honest and direct and communicative with our community, that's really all we're here to do, which is to be a personable friend, to be someone that you can trust. Like my theory on brand building has always been just be a dependable friend. Like those are my favorite kinds of brands. They show up time and again. They're allowed to change. You allow them the liberty and the freedom to change and to evolve and adapt. but they're there constantly. They show up on time. Like, that's what we like friends to do. When we're feeling low, we return to them. Like, and so I'm like, we just want to be a good friend. And as people, we're allowed to adapt and change. And sometimes we have it completely off. Like, we'll just be totally off target. And that's okay, because sometimes there are seasons with your friends where you're just like, oh, you don't get it or you don't see me, but you still return to them. And what it is at the end of the day, it's this through line of just being dependable, having integrity, showing up, consistency over and over and over again. And I wouldn't say that, I'm not the first person, I would never say that we're one of the best designers, or I'm one of the best designers, or we're the coolest or the most expensive, the most fashionable. Like, we barely make like headlines. I've always loved being third place. I say, I'm like, just keep us third place, because third place, we're still in the conversation. We don't have to fall. Like, first place is hard to defend. You know, I'm like, we can let Supreme have that, but let's let us be third place and just always be in the conversation. But we do that by just being around and for the community. And so it's really important for us to stay engaged and talking to our community, and we use the technology to do that. We also do a lot of stuff in person. We do events like this. But as long as we are facilitating and bridging a relationship between us and the community amongst each other, then everybody's fine. You know, we've never been interested in converting everybody. As a brand, we're a very niche brand in a niche market, even as big as streetwear has gotten. But to us, it's more important to curate and cultivate our room over and over again. You know, we always say we're not for everybody, we're for somebody. We're just only for certain people. And so as long as that works for us, like, I feel like we get to stick around.
Totally. And you kind of were number one, though, as the first brand to bridge the gap into Web3.
Into Web3, we were.
So
Yeah.
You kind of got to give yourself a pat on the back there.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about why
Yeah.
the Hundreds created Atom Bomb Squad? Why you think Web3 is important? I mean, why should it matter to everyone?
I think when you're considering any type of tech or any type of innovation in your work, you should be attempting to resolve some kind of issue, some gap, some kind of friction that you're wrestling with. And for us, it honestly came from a sense of guilt. I wrote a book published in 2019 called This Is Not a T-Shirt, which is the memoir. It's the
best-selling book?
Yes, it's a national best-selling book, but it's just like the story of how we built the Hundreds and also what my life was about. And my publisher tasked me with writing this book. He's just like, hey, why don't you go out there? The people want to know how you built this thing. That's really what they come to you for. It's like, no problem. And I got halfway through the book before I realized, I was like, I have no idea why I do this every day. Like, and I actually encourage all of you to attempt to write some type of memoir or a blog or a journal, and you will get to a point where you'll have this existential crisis of like, why the hell am I in fashion? And because when you start writing things down, if any of you do any good therapy work and you have to write stuff down and it's staring at you, you know, me talking about, the Hundreds, we did all this stuff, and I'm like, wait, but why? And I'm like, it's not for money, it's not to be cool, like, both of those things didn't really happen. It's not to be famous. That didn't happen at all. And so I'm like, why am I doing this? And then I realized, it's for community. Like, I didn't have a home, which is what I was saying in the beginning. I didn't have a home. And so I built this brand so that I would have a home and I would have a place where I felt like people connected to the things I was talking about. But, you know, when you talk about why people buy brands, why they buy clothing or want to be associated as in a tribal sense, why they want to identify with certain labels. There's 3 reasons, right? They do it for identity, they do it for community, and they do it for ownership or a feeling of ownership, almost like sports teams, right? The way that we're in New York, the way that you root for the Yankees or the Mets, like you root for your brand and you're really proud to see it do what it's doing because you feel like you're a part of that. You know, you have ownership in it. And so I wrote the rest of the book talking about all these things, and then I had an incredible and immense and almost like a crushing sense of guilt coming out the other side, because as much as there is identity in brand building, brand ownership, and wearing a brand, as much as there is community, you can find friends if someone's wearing like the 100 shirt or 100, hey, I know that brand, I know the guys who own it. The consumer really doesn't have any ownership in that exchange, right? And it's wildly unfair. And so at the end of 2020, I learned about what NFTs were, and I was just like, this doesn't make any sense. And the more I got into it, I was just like, this definitely doesn't make any sense, you guys. This is all a scam. I was like, well, is there any part of it that I find meaningful to the work and that can address an issue and a problem that I'm dealing with currently within the hundreds? And that problem had continued to be that our community, as much as I professed and proselytized this idea that they had ownership, they didn't actually own any of it. And here I am as one of the founders, making money, getting richer, and getting bigger. And here are the consumers who were just consuming and eating and supporting and praising me, right? Which sounds great. But when you do it for a while, and if you have any semblance of a conscience, you start feeling kind of weird about that. Right? And especially that in these days where there's such disparity in the system, there's so much wealth inequality, and there's so much imbalance. So I sit down, I'm studying Web3, and I look at this. That day I was wearing Nikes, and I was just like, every day I wake up and I put these swooshes on, and I don't get paid to do this. Right? I'm not like a representative of Nike. I wear it because there's identity, there's community, but there's no ownership. This is incredibly unfair. Right? I'm looking at Phil Knight, all these guys are making billions of dollars. I'm like, why am I wearing and advertising for this brand every day? And I remember in the 90s when I got deep into skateboarding and I'd wear like big like Powell and Thinks and Acme skateboard logos, like the 90s were big logos, right? And my mom would always be like, you look like a walking billboard. These companies don't care about you. I'm like, fuck you, Mom, you don't get it. This brand is cool. I'm a part of it. I'm cool because I'm down with it. But really, they're using me to advertise. Yeah. And I'm like, that's what we've been doing for 20 years. It's telling our kids, hey, you're not enough if you don't wear this brand. You're not cool enough. You need to have X amount of money, and then you need to give it to me so that you have some kind of access or some kind of respect in your social space. Otherwise, you're just not enough, right? These are the lessons that we've instilled and institutionalized our young people to think about all day long, right? So now they're just covered with brands. Mom, Dad, if I don't have this, I'm not enough. I'm not going to get in. I'm not going to play a part. And meanwhile, we're reaping all the benefits. And so then I look at Web3 and I'm like, oh, here for the very first time, we can disrupt and repair a lot of that imbalance and that disparity that exists out there, especially in fashion. Why are we going out there every day? You know, if I'm wearing New Balance right now, I don't get paid by them to do this, but I'm advertising for them, and I'm an influencer. I should take a cut of that. And everyone's an influencer. If you have social media, I don't care if you have 5 followers or 5 million, you're influencing at least 5 to 5 million people, right? Even if you don't have social media, you're going down to your barbershop, you're sitting down at dinner with your friend, you're influencing your friend. Your friend's like, oh, that's really cute. I like your top. I like your thing. Oh, where'd you get that jacket? I want to buy one of those. You just influence them. You should have participation in whatever the company benefited on the upside of that, right? It seems fair to me. Right? And a lot of that logic came down just seeing what Web3 was doing in terms of social media. And sorry, Instagram, that we have to talk about this, but big tech for the last 10, 15 years has benefited off of all of social media users' backs, right? Putting your content up against advertising and making money off of it. They call it democratized, and they said that, anything on the internet's for free, and you post a JPEG, it's for everybody. It's not, because Google made money off of that photo that you posted. Your clever caption that you wrote that inspired somebody. Meta made money off of that. And meanwhile, you get nothing. And now we're like, wow, how did these tech giants get so big? They control everything now. How did this happen? Well, guess what? We all just gave them free content for 10 years. It's insane. And like many of you come from media and you know how much content it's actually worth something. It's just insane to me. People put out beautiful art every single day, and they don't make a penny off of it. I'm like, how is that fair? And then meanwhile, you walk these galleries, and you're seeing people make like $10 million, $100 million off of selling paintings. Like, some of your art is really worth that much, but you were told, and you've been conditioned to believe over and over again that it's worthless, right? And so it's the same in fashion. And we've conditioned our customers and our communities to believe that they don't get to participate in any of this. Well, here for the first time, they should, right? And so now if you buy an NFT or whatever you want to call them now, digital collectible, in theory, as the brand, as the cachet and the reputation of the brand heightens in the market, then they should also be holding onto an asset that grows on the secondary marketplace so that they can flip it or resell it if they wanted to or had to. Or there's just more social value around being associated with that JPEG or that image that exists in their crypto wallet. A lot of this stuff, if it's just kind of flying over your head, it's fine. It should. It's very confusing. I try to write about. Oh, I think we gave everybody a copy of the book. Is this true? This book doesn't come out till May 16th. This is my next book. It's called NFTs Are a Scam. On the back it says NFTs are the future. And it's up to you to decide because I'm not here to tell you what it is. I'm just going to lay out all the facts. There's a lot of soft, blurry parts of Web3, as we all know. Some weird gambling and Ponzi, like crypto stuff going on. And then there's some very real thoughts that are coming out of it, just philosophically, that may make you look at your business in a more healthy way in terms of culture and in terms of the environment, right? And so you all get this book. It doesn't come out for, you're the first ones to read it. I didn't even know that my publisher did this for everybody, but it's amazing that they did. Shout out FSG. But anyways, I don't even remember what the question was.
I forget too. No, I'm just kidding. But there's been incredible. You talk about the secondary market and you talk about ownership. And the last I checked this morning, it was like over $45 million of secondary movement.
Yes.
Just of assets going from one user to another.
Yeah.
And that's incredible for someone who is a part of the community who now has like real monetary value associated with being a part of this project.
Yeah,
and I'm sure you've. I mean, I'm sure you hear the success stories from consumers. Like,
for sure.
Yeah.
Like if you bought, when we minted, which means when we released we made 25,000 NFTs,
which was crazy at the time.
Which was crazy.
But maybe not
this
now.
was August of when was it, Ben? 2021, August 2021. Yeah. So. At the time, if you were dropping a collection of NFTs, at the most, you would do 10,000. A lot of people would just do one at a time, like one piece of art. We did 25,000. We sold out in 40 minutes, and we sold each of them at the time for like 0.1 ETH, which was like $330. And they sold out in 40 minutes, which we honestly did not expect or even really wanted to happen. We were just like, okay, because nothing comes for free, everybody. Like, there's responsibility on the other side of that. We're like, fuck, now we have like about
real
8
business.
to 9,000 different people who are pounding on the door for customer service. They're like, why am I not rich yet? And I'm like, that's not what this is about, but okay. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, people made a lot of money flipping and trading those things, which is fine. I have no problem with the secondary market on anything, right? Especially with sneakers, and now we're seeing it with fashion. Luxury handbags has a great secondary right now. But it can't be the only thing. And that's probably the thing that I'll impart on everybody as we leave here today, that much of the narrative right now around Web3 and NFTs is completely controlled and dominated by this idea of getting rich off of trading and secondary market and reducing art down to essentially shit coins and stocks and like day trading assets. The thing is that technology can often be a bellwether of things to come, right? And so NFTs are almost like a really extreme hyper version of what we're seeing happen right now with sneakers. Eventually sneakers, if you think about it, it doesn't really make sense to trade them in terms of like, oh, I bought a pair, I'm never gonna wear it, I'm gonna flip them to StockX, I send them, and then that gets sent over here, and then they give me money. It takes too long. So then they'll just be all held in a centralized vault somewhere, and it'll trade like an NFT, like a stock. And if anyone wants to call the sneaker out, they'll call the sneaker out, and then they'll ship them. It saves everybody on like carbon footprint and the gas prices of like shipping this shoe back and forth. But what it'll do, like on the bad end of things, is that it's going to reduce everything down to a stock. And you're going to see it's happening with art. A lot of things are going to end up on blockchain and start doing this, right? You're going to see it happen across the board. And it's, again, I have no problem. Like, there's nothing wrong with trading. It's all a part of the ecosystem. But the ecosystem can't also just be weighted disproportionately on the side of secondary value, right? We also have to focus on primary value and keeping things. And so it's just the last thing I want to leave everybody with, because resale and this idea of secondary markets and secondary trading are very popular right now. People are making a lot of money. But when it only becomes about the money, you realize that like all money is green. and that now it doesn't matter what the art looks like, and then it eventually just becomes just data, a string of code, which really an NFT at the end of the day is just a string of code on the blockchain. It's not even the art. And so NFTs have already shown you where it can end up, because NFTs blew up so fast and then they plummeted just as fast, right? And so already this time last year, everyone was on cloud nine. We were throwing these insane parties. We had Pusha T performing in Times Square, all these sponsors throwing us money.
Yeah.
And then this year, everyone's just like, NFTs, aren't those dead? And I'm like, watch what happens to everything else that's predicated on only secondary sales. And so this is the hopeful thing I will say is that this is a time for Web3 and NFTs and for whatever blockchain assets art to build appropriately and for there to be a proper culture to foment around. And streetwear has proven that. Streetwear has sustained and thrived and survived many different types of hype cycles centered around secondary trading because there's such a veritable and authentic culture that's rooting it. Thank God that we had 10 arguably to 20 years where streetwear was largely centered just around artists making shit and trying not to sell it, right? Like when there's an anecdote in my first book where, and this is not a t-shirt, where at our first trade shows, we actually used to cover our rack to not sell. And so we'd have, all the department stores and all the chains were showing up. They're like, hey, can we place an order? And we're like, no, we're not here to sell it. It just completely threw everybody off. But that idea is really what streetwear's always been around. It's just we're here to establish the culture first. We want you to focus on the art and who we are as people. We want to build an organic community. We want to build a sustainable future. And so this is how we're going to do it. We're not going to take the money up front. And a lot of that's been forgotten because, again, everyone just wants money now. And you're seeing a lot of beautiful cultures erode because of it. I just don't want to see that happen in other arenas.
Well said.
Thanks, everyone.
Amazing. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
we're out of time, but thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Thank
Bobby.
you. Thanks, Dennis.
This was awesome. Yeah.
Thanks.